Hey there, welcome to episode 87 of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my Marvel Legends collection. And I mean my entire Marvel Legends collection. And it's a good-sized collection. Now, just to give you a little bit of background on Marvel Legends, it is a 6-inch toy line that was started by Toy Biz back in 2002, and then it was taken over by Hasbro in 2007. Now, I wasn't really interested in the line in those early days, mostly because as a kind of a teenager and stuff in the 90s, I had collected Toy Biz's kind of 5-inch line of Marvel characters. So like here's the Lizard. These were based on the animated series that were out at the time. So like the 90s X-Men, 90s Spider-Man cartoon. So I had a ton of these guys. I had a ton of different characters, and when they kind of made the switch from these ones to Marvel Legends, I just really didn't want to have to buy all these characters all over again. And then, after several years of not really buying any Marvel characters, I kind of went all in on this 3 3/4 inch line that was called Marvel Universe. So these guys here are even shorter than the 90s figures. These guys are about the same size of a G.I. Joe, and I had a whole bunch of these figures. So this is what I was collecting. And honestly, I picked up a couple of Marvel Legends here and there. It was mostly characters that I either couldn't get in the 3 3/4 inch scale, and they were fan favorites of mine. So like, for example, there was no Deathlok figure in the small line, at least not in the first couple of years. So I bought this Deathlok Marvel Legends. So this is a 6-inch Marvel Legend, but this kind of shows you what I didn't like about these toys. You see he's articulated even at the toes, so like his toes can go up like that. He's got the double jointed knee, which is kind of normal now, but at the time that was pretty new, and it made for kind of gangly legs. The way his these kind of socket jointed shoulders were supposed to give him more movement, but they're like this big ball that's separate from his torso. It doesn't really look like real anatomy. They tried so hard to give him all this extra articulation, like his fingers move here. It was just too much. So I just didn't really care for this aesthetic of Marvel Legends. So I just kept going with the 3 3/4 inch line. Now I would occasionally buy figures in different scales. Like there's a toy line called Marvel Select, which I have a few of those, and I actually display them with my Marvel Legends. For example, so this here is the Watcher from Marvel Select, and he is to scale with Marvel Legends figures. They haven't made this character in the Marvel Legends, so he looks just fine there with them. However, I'm not going to talk about any figures like this in this particular video. I am just going to show you my Marvel Legends. And I'm also, a couple other things I won't show you is I'm not going to bother bringing out any of these characters I have from the early years of the Marvel Legends run, because in 2014, Hasbro really kind of revamped the whole line. So even though they've been doing it since 2007 when they took over from Toy Biz, they kind of kept the same Toy Biz aesthetic. Like I said, the kind of lanky kind of weirdness. And in 2014, that's when they kind of reimagined the line. They wanted to like revitalize it because the Marvel movies were like really popular, and they wanted to capitalize on making these really nice 6-inch figures. So 2014, that's when I really started collecting in earnest. And I wouldn't say I became a completist, but I buy a lot of the figures. A couple of the other ones I won't bother to show you is that one of the ways that Hasbro gets me to buy so many figures is that they make the Build-A-Figures. So you buy these 6 characters, each character has an arm and a leg, and if you buy all 6, then you can build a bonus figure. So if there was like 5 characters I wanted, of course I'm going to buy the 6th, just so I can create the Build-A-Figure. So I have plenty of incomplete Build-A-Figures. For example, this one here is the Ultimate Green Goblin. Now, I can't display him on my shelf with no arms. Now, sometimes if I have a Build-A-Figure and I feel I have arms for another character that match up with him good enough, like if I had Abomination, who's another big green character, I could put Abomination arms in there, and I would probably display this guy in my collection. But I have all kinds of incomplete Build-A-Figures, so I'm not going to bother showing them in this video here. I am just going to run through my Marvel Legends collection of complete characters from 2014 until now. So these are the figures I've collected over the past 6 years, and to my surprise, there are 292 of them. So I learned from experience because I did a video not too long ago about my Marvel Universe, the 3 3/4 inch collection, and I tried to show every figure and talk about each one, and I learned about halfway through the video that it was just running really long, so then I kind of had to rush through everything else. So for this video here, what I decided to do is I just took still images of all my figures. I'm just going to let them play through kind of a slideshow, 4 seconds each, and even that, once I had completed that, I still had 24 minutes of just slideshow. Marvel Legends costs about $30 a piece. Now, there's some that I've gotten cheaper, but there's also some that have been more expensive. So if I said on average $30, and that's not taking into account taxes and all that sort of stuff. So $30, 292 figures would have cost me $8,760. So yeah, let's take a run through and see if you think these figures are worth the almost $9,000 that I spent on them. So we're starting off here with one of the Build-A-Figures, the Absorbing Man, followed by Adam Warlock. Now, I'm not going to talk about each one of these figures because, as I mentioned earlier, I've just got them cycling through this slideshow at 4 seconds a piece, and I don't think I could talk a whole lot about each figure in 4 seconds. These two AIM guys came as a 2-pack with lots of customizable options, so that was pretty cool. Angela here is kind of an interesting character because she actually first appeared in Spawn, which is not a Marvel comic book, but Marvel got their mitts on her. Anti-Venom and Agent Anti-Venom. This is obviously the reverse of Venom, who we'll see later. Now, after taking these photos, this Ant-Man right here, which is Paul Rudd's head, I really didn't like that picture. I realized I really don't like that head. I probably should have taken the picture with his alternate masked head, but oh well. This Ares figure is really nice, except his head, you can't lift it up. Like, it's always stuck looking down. It's just the way that it's designed, so that's kind of a bummer. Now, after Arnim Zola here, you'll see we've got Baron Mordo. So this is based on the movies. That's why I have in brackets there, I have MCU for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've got quite a few movie-based figures, but I do prefer the comic versions. Another thing you'll see here is for Beetle. I have his name afterwards, Abner Jenkins. The only reason I've done that is because this character is also called the Beetle, but it was Janice Lincoln who wore the outfit there. So when there are two specific people that were basically the same costume character, I tried to differentiate them by giving you the name, but I didn't put everybody's civilian name next to their superhero name because I just didn't think it was necessary for absolutely everybody. I tried to differentiate the versions of these characters as well, but for a character like Black Cat here, I labeled both figures Black Cat because there's not a whole lot of difference between them. They don't represent any particular era or some alternate universe or anything like that. It's just a new version of the character. And they do that plenty. Like, there must be probably 30 or 40 different versions of Iron Man out there. I just tend not to buy duplicates if I can avoid it. Usually I only end up with duplicates of a character because I'm trying to buy a Build-A-Figure and I feel forced to buy duplicates. Oddly enough here, Black Widow is not like a favorite character of mine necessarily, but she's one of the characters I have the most versions of. I think we just scrolled through 4 or 5 different versions of the Black Widow. And I might end up with more because with her new movie coming out, they put out a whole line of Black Widow figures. And I really like a lot of them. Not even because I need them to buy or to complete a Build-A-Figure, but there just are a couple other versions of the Black Widow that I'd like to pick up. So I could end up with 6 or 7 of them when all is said and done. Boomerang, who just flew past there. That's Boomerang in his more modern outfit, which is a fine costume. But I mostly grew up reading comic books in the 80s. That's when I first encountered all these characters for the first time. So I tend to gravitate towards their 80s looks more so than their contemporary looks. That's not the case for absolutely everybody, but for somebody like Boomerang, I would have preferred the old kind of classic costume for him, and I hope that we get that eventually. I've got another character here coming up after Sam Wilson, Captain America. So Captain Britain here. This is another character. I love him. It's a great costume, but that version there has his more contemporary helmeted look rather than his masked look, which is kind of a bummer because the masked look is kind of what I grew up on. So even though that's a great Captain Britain figure, I still feel like I need the 80s version as well. it's really nice when they just nail it the first time out of the park. Like this Cobra figure. It's a very good Cobra figure. I don't think I'll need another one. Colossus. This is a character who I would like. There is a newer version of him available that's got a more classic costume on, because that version there is pretty good, and the costume is similar to his classic costume. It's yellow, it's red, but it's just not a costume that I'm really familiar with. So yeah, I want to get that classic 80s costume with the short pants and the big shoulder pads, and that figure is now available in a 2-pack with the Juggernaut, so I will probably pick it up eventually if I find it on sale. Who else have we got here? So Dagger, we already saw her partner Cloak earlier. Those are some of those kind of C-list Marvel characters that I love, and I'm so happy that Hasbro's including them in this collection. Because it would be easy for Hasbro to just keep making the same characters like Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man over and over and over again. But and they do that. But it's really nice that they slip in characters like Cloak and Dagger and Darkhawk when they have the chance. Like Dazzler here, this is a character I never thought I'd see in action figure form. At least not this version. This one here, which is kind of her 80s X-Men look, I expected them to make a figure of that one day, but the fact that we got her 70s disco look is just crazy to me. Hasbro has made some really cool figures in this collection. Deadpool there, you'll notice I had both his red version and his X-Force gray version. Same with Deathlok here. There's his X-Force gray version. Now, Deadpool is not a character that I necessarily would have bought that gray version. I didn't really feel it was necessary, and he's not really a favorite character of mine. But that's one of those examples where I needed it to complete a Build-A-Figure. So that is very clever marketing on Hasbro's behalf, which I think was actually Toy Biz that had originated the Build-A-Figure. So Hasbro just kind of lifted that idea from them, but it is a great idea. Doctor Strange here. This is a decent figure, but I would like more of a classic version. It's always kind of a bummer when I have this weird contemporary outfit and I want the classic, like, red caped version. Now, Dupe here, this guy was just an accessory that came with a Toy Biz Deadpool figure. So I know I said in my intro I wasn't going to include any old Toy Biz figures, but the reason I don't include those ones is because I don't really find they're not compatible with these modern figures. They're just, the size and scale just looks a little off. Like I said, the articulation makes them look kind of wonky. But Dupe, they've never redone a Dupe. That's the only figure of him that I think has ever existed. And he doesn't really have any articulation other than a little bit in his arms. So he blends in just fine with these figures, and I display him with them on my shelf currently. Ex Nihilo, or I think that's how you pronounce his name. That's one of the few characters that I really have no idea anything about him. Again, I had to buy him in order to complete a Build-A-Figure, but I don't know. I literally know nothing about him. Most Marvel characters, even if I've never read the book, I know something about them because I've been reading so many Marvel books. So even a character like Doctor Strange, I've never collected Doctor Strange comic books, but he guest appears in Spider-Man on the regular, and he's in all the big crossover events. So, I get my fair share of all these guys. But yeah, somebody like Ex Nihilo, never seen him, don't know what his deal is. You'll notice there in my Giant Man picture, I tried to get a little creative and put a little dinky car underneath his foot just to show you the scale. Green Goblin here, this is one of my least favorite figures, just because he's one of my favorite characters, and I really feel they failed to capture his classic iconic look with that head sculpt. Thankfully, they're redoing the Green Goblin soon, and I should probably have an updated Green Goblin in maybe a month or two. You just saw Guardian there, so he was the leader of Alpha Flight, the Canadian super team, which most people that watch these videos, as I can tell from my analytics, most of my viewers are in the United States, and I've got some international. Of course, I have some from Canada. That's where I'm from. But I wonder if you international viewers would assume that all Canadians must love Guardian and the rest of Alpha Flight because they're our one and only Canadian super team. Well, I can't vouch for all the other Canadians, but I can tell you that I've never been a fan of Alpha Flight. There's a box set where you can get the rest of the members of the team, and I did not buy it. Nobody in that set really interests me. So, yeah, I don't know if that makes me unpatriotic or what, but what are you going to do? So here's some Hulk figures. This is one of my most recent acquisitions, which is the Red Hulk. So this is a great figure. He's one of the ones that was more expensive than $30. They've just kind of only recently started releasing these deluxe figures. So these are figures that are usually larger, and they come in like, their packages are like $40 or $45 or something like that. So hopefully we don't see too many of those. But it is nice in that what they're doing, in that some of the figures that were previously only available as Build-A-Figures, so you had to buy 6 or 7 figures to complete them. Now they're taking those same bigger Build-A-Figures and just releasing them as single carded deluxe figures. So now you can get one for $40 or $45 instead of spending, $110, $120 to complete the Build-A-Figure like you used to have to do. So Iron Man here. This one here is kind of the classic Iron Man, which is still my favorite look. I don't have any of the movie-based Iron Man figures. Like, I really like the way his armor looks in the movies, but at the same time, I'm just a sucker for the simple comic book look. I don't need a ton of accessories and gadgets. Like this version of the Iron Patriot, I just find a little too busy. I like a more of a sleek, cleaner armor. Jack-O-Lantern, this is one of my all-time favorite Marvel characters, and this is a nice figure, but I'd really like to get one in his classic green outfit from the 80s. That version that you saw there is actually a different character, because the Jack-O-Lantern I grew up with died. He's come back from the dead, I think, but I think he might be currently dead. It's hard for me to keep track. But yeah, that Jack-O-Lantern that you saw there, he's actually some new guy who's an enemy of Venom. Who else we got here? So Kingpin, this was a Build-A-Figure, so I had to buy 6 or 7 to complete him, but he's one of those figures that they're now releasing as a single carded deluxe figure, so people that missed him can now get him. Now you see the Kree Sentry here. I don't have the 2 figures that came with his arms, but I did have some Hulk arms, and they fit in the pegs, so that's I have him complete. It kind of looks believable that those big green arms could come out of that robot. Now you might recall, if you've been watching this video from the start, I had that Ultimate Green Goblin figure who was green and he was missing arms. So you might think, well, why don't you put those Hulk arms in him? It would make a lot more sense than putting them in the Kree Sentry. But the problem is not all the Build-A-Figures are created the same. The pegs are different. So the arms and legs and stuff, they just don't fit with every single torso. So those Hulk arms, they do not fit into the Ultimate Green Goblin's body. They just kind of rattle around loose and fall out. So that's why I didn't use them on him, and instead I used them on the Kree Sentry. So who else we got here? So Mirage. So she's a member of the New Mutants. Now what's cool about her is when you bought that figure, it came with 3 different heads, because the New Mutants, they all had the same costume, and they were all like teenagers. So rather than release 3 separate figures, what they did is they just gave you the one body with 3 heads, so you could use that as Mirage, as Karma, and as Wolfsbane. And not only did they give you the alternate heads, but they gave you alternate hands, so they matched up with those characters. Now, I bought that figure twice, so I have the same body, but I have one displayed with the Mirage head and one displayed with the Karma head, which is why I included them both in this video, because I have them displayed on my shelf. I did not include Wolfsbane in this video because I don't have her displayed on my shelf. I could have just popped Mirage's head off and put Wolfsbane on there and made it look like I have another figure, but in order for me to display Wolfsbane, I feel I got to go out and actually buy that same figure over again, so I have 3 bodies and I can display them all at once. Who else we got here? Namor. This is a great figure. Namor's classic costume is usually just a green Speedo. He's one of those characters where I feel the more contemporary costume really works for him. They did make a version of him in the green Speedo, but yeah, it's not a look that I love. I think he looks much better in the full black bodysuit. Night Thrasher that you just saw, he's a member of the 90s teen super team, the New Warriors. So was this Nova. And that book was a lot of fun. I'm really hoping they get around to releasing the other members of the New Warriors at some point. like Speedball and named Mordo. Who else was there? Anyway, it was a fun book, and yeah, I don't like when they leave us incomplete teams. Another character you just scrolled past a couple minutes ago was Nico Minoru, and she is a member of the team The Runaways. And so far, she's the only member of The Runaways that they've produced. So I kind of wonder like why they bothered to make her. It doesn't seem like they have any plans to make the other guys, at least no time soon. And that's kind of a bummer when you end up with just like one or two members of a team of 5. Like, if they don't think they're popular enough to sell, maybe they could do what they did with Alpha Flight and just release a box set and make it exclusive to a certain website or a certain store. And that way the hardcore fans could complete their sets. Here's the Red Goblin. So this is a version of the Green Goblin with the Carnage symbiote. It's a relatively new character, but I actually really like it. I don't know why. I think it's kind of corny that they took 2 characters and mashed them together, but it just works. Rocket Raccoon. This is a fun little figure. He's great in the movies. I still, to this day, I can't believe Rocket Raccoon is a household name for kids now, because I remember when that original Rocket Raccoon miniseries came out in the 80s, and he'd basically totally been forgotten about for a couple of decades before he got revived in the Guardians of the Galaxy comic book, and now he's in the movies, and it's crazy. But yeah, it would be nice if they gave us a comic accurate version of Rocket Raccoon one day in his original green outfit. So here we've got Scarlet Spider. Here's another Scarlet Spider, and this is sort of like the Black Cat. This is a figure who they've just released 2 versions of. I didn't really know what else to call it, so I just said Scarlet Spider 2. But really, it's the same figure, it's the same design. It's just they were made a couple of years apart, and I guess Hasbro thought they could make a better figure. So yeah, what else we got here? So Scream. Now, I labeled this character as Shadow Cat because that's how I always refer to her, but I think she's kind of dropped that name. I believe the figure, the packaging just said Kitty Pryde, because that's kind of what she goes by these days. But I still like calling her Shadow Cat. She-Hulk. This is a relatively new figure that I just got at the start of 2020, and I really like that She-Hulk figure. Her and the Doctor Doom figure that you would have seen, I don't know, 10 minutes ago. Those are both contenders for my best of the year list. I think they're both great figures. So we're getting into the spider people soon. So that was Silk. If you're not familiar with her, she's a character that was introduced a couple of years ago who supposedly got her powers at the same time as Spider-Man. It's a bit of a convoluted backstory. I won't get into it so much. But as I mentioned earlier, I try not to get multiples of certain characters if I can avoid it. So I don't want to just buy 10 different versions of Captain America. But once we get into Spider-Man, you'll see how many different versions of Spider-Man I have. And it might seem a little excessive, but I can justify that because, well, this guy here, the first one you see, I don't know how you pronounce that guy's name, by the way. That's how they spell it in the comic books, SP //DR. I don't know if it's just Spider or something more complicated. But yeah, so all these versions of Spider-Girl, you'll see, let me see, there's another Spider-Gwen. After her, we've got Spider-Ham, the pig. So not only did they do that Spider-Verse movie, but they did a whole comic book series about the Spider-Verse where all the different Spider-Men from all the different universes had to team up to fight a common enemy. And so by doing that, it makes me feel that these guys aren't just repeats of one character and over again. I can justify in my head having all these different Spider-Mans on my shelf because they're all different Spider-Mans from different universes, and they all team up when they have to. So yeah, like this one here is based on the PlayStation 4 video game, and they actually introduced him into the comic book as a separate character who has now met the Peter Parker of the comic book world. This Spider-Man is from an alternate world that was in the X-Men comic books a while back called House of M. We've got a couple armored versions of Spider-Man. This Cosmic Spider-Man is based on a story in the, I believe it was the 80s, maybe the early 90s, where Spider-Man got the Captain Universe cosmic powers. You'll see here I've got a few versions of the Tom Holland Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man. And then these guys here, these are Spider-Men, but they're not Peter Parker. So this is Miguel O'Hara, the Spider-Man of 2099, in his two different costumes. This here is this is the Superior Spider-Man, who is actually Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man's body. I won't get into all that. Spider-Man Noir, he's Peter Parker from a different universe. Spider-Punk, this guy is actually Hobie Brown, who is the Prowler, but in his universe, Hobie Brown became Spider-Man. You've got Spider UK, who you just saw, who's like a British Spider-Man, but he is not a British Peter Parker. He's actually Brian Braddock, the character that's Captain Britain in the Marvel Universe, became a Spider-Man in his universe. So yeah, it gets complicated. Lots of spider people. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Spymaster, he's a new character this year, or a new figure this year, based on an old 80s favorite of mine. It's really cool that we got a figure of him. Stinger, this is a character that I was excited to get a figure of. Not because I particularly love the character, but because of what she represents. She's from kind of a long-forgotten alternate universe that was created in Marvel called the MC2 universe, which took place, 20 years in the future from the regular Marvel universe, and it featured a lot of these current Marvel characters, kids, and they were now superheroes. So Stinger was, I believe, the daughter of Wasp and Ant-Man. And yes, they don't do any books set in the MC2 universe anymore, but I enjoyed them while they were around. Got a couple versions of Taskmaster here. Thanos, this is a great figure. He's another one. He's a character that I've loved since the 80s when because he was killed off in the 70s, but he was brought back in the Silver Surfer book that I was collecting in the 80s. And he was such a cool villain. And now, like Rocket Raccoon, he's become a household name from the movies, which is just it's really cool that my mom knows who Thanos is. Like, how crazy is that? Here we have a couple versions of Thor. Now, it's kind of a bummer because I don't have what I feel is like a really good, solid, classic Thor. Like, you'll notice I had Young Thor, which is from Jason Aaron's run on the Thor book, where he's got Thor from the current universe teamed up with Thor from his youth and Thor from the future. So I've got Young Thor, and then I've got a couple versions of Thor from the movies, and then I've got Lady Thor, but I don't have just kind of a classic comic book Thor. Now, the reason that would normally bother me, but it doesn't bother me too much because I have a really nice Marvel Select version of comic book Thor that I display on my shelf with all these figures. So it doesn't feel like I'm missing a Thor necessarily. Here we have a couple of versions of Valkyrie. Now, Vance Astro here, you may not know him, but he is a member of the original Guardians of the Galaxy team, and I really hope we get the rest of those guys at some point. Instead, we've just got all these, the new Guardians of the Galaxy, like Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord. But yeah, I'm really hoping we get the rest of those guys because I was a big fan of the Guardians comic book in the 80s and 90s. Here we got a bunch of different versions of Venom, followed by a couple of different versions of the Vision. Now, even though I've got three versions of the Vision here, this one here I actually really like the look of it. And the movie one looks really nice too. But he's another character that, despite me having three versions of him, I don't really feel like I have a classic, iconic version of Vision, so I still feel I need to seek out another one. This movie version of the Vulture is really cool. And you see how big his wings are there. I could barely fit them on screen. They were actually a Build-A-Figure unto themselves. So you could buy the Vulture as just a regular character, but every figure in the wave came with a piece of his wing set. So if you wanted his wings, you had to buy all the different figures, which is partly why I have some of those Marvel Cinematic Universe Tom Holland Spider-Man that I might not have bought otherwise, but I needed them to build those wings. All right. What else we got? We got the White Queen, the White Rabbit. This is a figure that I've enjoyed since the 80s, and I can't believe we actually got an action figure of her just this past year, so that's pretty cool. The Winter Soldier, so both comic book and movie versions of him. Now I've got a few different versions of Wolverine. So here you see his first appearance. He's kind of classic, well, his modern look, and then his black and gray kind of stealth X-Force suit, as well as I have Lady Wolverine here. His daughter slash clone X-23 took over the mantle of Wolverine when he was dead for a little while. Now we're into the Ys here. I have a character representing almost every letter of the alphabet. Nobody in the Z's or the Z's. And I don't think I had a Q, but anyway, that brings us to the end of my collection. So that is my Marvel Legend collection. Thank you for sitting through that whole thing, those of you that did. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like this, please let me know in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, so if you have any questions, comments, leave them below. I'm happy to answer and converse. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.